Hello ladies and gents, it's been a while since I've made some of these Starfield videos and I kind of wanted to get back into it because I seen that there was a new 5-minute video talking about the game a little bit more and even showing like 5 seconds of gameplay in the form of that companion that you could see, which was clearly a robot. Now there's a lot of speculation that I can make around that surrounding like could you control the robot in order to go outside of your ship? Things like that I think of immediately as extra utility that you have when you got a robot companion. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about AI and if perhaps this is like a traditional robot or something that is more AI sentient with its own free will. People which are familiar with the Star Trek universe kind of will understand that a little bit more in terms of the kind of like philosophy you can kind of dive into there as well. So I'll be interested to see how that plays out in this game. I did also want to talk a little bit about how we do have a while to wait until E3, which is likely when we're going to see a big release in terms of information from Bethesda. Because if you think about it, last year we did have the Microsoft conference in combination with Bethesda, and I expect this will be no different. And so what we're looking at right now is actually around a 3-month wait for any extra news to start coming out about Starfield in any major way, most likely. Although we probably will before then see one more video, perhaps even two, talking about the game similarly to how this one did it as well. There are some interesting highlights which I did read a little bit about and see in the video as well. At 1:30 mark we can see that there was a talk about hardcore RPG elements that they used to do in older titles and bringing them back in a newer way. One of the ways that they seem to be interested in implementing in hardcore old RPG elements is with a persuasion system which might work a little bit like D&D if you've ever played that, where maybe you have to roll, or it could be kind of something like Fallout where there are prerequisites that you have to get, or it could be a chance where sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, which it does seem to be leaning towards. We did also again have confirmation from the devs that this is going to be, in quotations, a massive game world. And so we're looking forward to that kind of thing as well. They've said that character creation has been increased significantly and improved. They talked a lot about how they're going to have united colonies with an idealized future space republic, which is great to see because I hate a lot of the times in modern writing, people tend to go cynical. They tend to see the bad, and they tend to double down on all of those negatives. And again, as someone who has watched all of the Star Trek episodes that have ever come out, I can tell you with a degree of authority that you can do a lot without a world blowing up every single episode, or the galaxy being at risk every episode. There's a plethora of topics to discuss, especially in a sci-fi universe, and you can kind of mirror it with things that are happening in real life now, in abstract ways, in order to kind of get people to see different ways of thinking and broaden people's minds, and also to show a future again that is a better place than we have right now. Not that now is bad, but just to see something a bit different, to see what the future could hold. That's hopeful, and I hope, and it seems to be what the Starfield devs are going to at least have some degree of. But then they also do seem to be going for the more cynical part as well. You know, you've got aliens that seem to be hung on the side of a wall in one of the screenshots, and there's a cross next to an alien symbol, which kind of infers, you know, don't allow aliens in there. Any aliens that come in will be, I guess, killed. And so there you can see a distrust, and I'm okay with that. As long as there is some places in which you can see beacons of humanity, you can see things going well, and you can also see the reasoning behind that and how it happened, and maybe even see some arguments for and against that, instead of what we have right now in a lot of the modern series and TV shows and in games, where, you know, the entire government's corrupt, or someone's doing something really bad, or the galaxy's gonna blow up. And instead it can be more micro things like how people are being treated relative to other people. Now we do seem to have a few other factions here as well. One of them's gonna be an Old West fantasy, frontier style thing, where if you think about in, I think it was the 1700s, 1800s or something in America, when people were traveling through, you know, Texas for the first time and all of those kind of deserty regions, you had that vast frontier of people, cowboys kind of settling in. And likewise with Starfield, you're going to have a similar kind of aesthetic established where, you know, it's the fast people there. They're a bit hardy, they probably don't take any bullshit, they probably don't talk in riddles that much, and I really look forward to seeing that kind of faction develop within the universe of Starfield as well. We also saw a corporate faction type of thing, which to be honest I'm not super interested in looking forward to, because I think that it's been played out, especially when I look at something like Cyberpunk, which I think really the corporate kind of lore behind that kind of stuff is very predictable. They also have something called a Crimson Fleet, which is meant to be not just bad guys, but a joinable faction, which perhaps will have elements or characters within it that you can empathize with, or perhaps even enjoy the characters of, even though they do questionable things or have, you know, bad ideas, or maybe they justify their violence based on their hatred for example, the corporate kind of faction. And I expect that kind of stuff dichotomy to play out again. That's also something that I have some interest in seeing, and the struggles associated with going against authority, but I don't know if they're going to do it correctly, or if it is again just going to be bad guys that are stealing stuff. You know, it's typical pirates, because they did mention they're going to have space pirates in the game. Again, what are their justifications for doing that? Is it that there's, you know, a ruling elite that's stopping free trade or something? Or is it simply, you know, they're bad guys? And so we'll see what kind of nuance there is with that faction as well. I did also touch about this in the beginning, but one of the big things that they did mention as well was companions. We know that there's going to be a robot because we saw the robot, and we also kind of saw some gameplay associated with it, which shown off not only the character, but also if you look at the environment surrounding it in that video, you can see the lighting, and you can also see a good idea of what the art style is going to be, which I would say is pretty similar to Fallout 4 in terms of graphic fidelity, but more modern and normal in terms of art style. If you just think about like how things look, how things are presented, it's just like normal crates. Kind of something that you'd see in the Brotherhood of Steel, you know, a more modernistic, normal aesthetic that we're used to, instead of the more, you know, 1960s aesthetic which we're used to with the Fallout franchise. I am also happy that the devs are going to be looking into what they revealed at the end, which is, and they've mentioned this before as well, is talking about the big questions that they're going to be kind of trying to address, which is, why are we all here? Where is it leading? What is next for humanity? Those kind of questions, I think, don't really have any super big answers associated with them that the game's going to kind of really lead you down, other than things that we kind of already know. I don't expect it to have anything other than cliches there, although I will be interested to see if they do go down something a bit more nuanced. So for example, we know that there's aliens, and we know that they're being persecuted, and I strongly suspect that part of the, you know, big questions as to why we're all here is going to be helping out those aliens, for example, in some way, most likely. If it was a true RPG, and I don't know if Starfield would ever do this, but it would be funny to see like a Space Hitler which does really kind of double down on messing up the aliens, or, you know, you can really play the bad faction and they are a bad faction and they're like terrorists or whatever. I strongly doubt they're going to go down that route though. It's very much probably going to be quite a normal experience in terms of sci-fi stuff, and I think that they can approach that with a degree of fidelity where they could approach those subjects and it'd be okay. For example, in Star Trek you had stuff like human gene editing, where there was like superhumans, and there was discussion about like if they should be allowed to exist, because if they procreate and they grow as a civilization, they would entirely, you know, kill off all of the humans if they wanted to because of their sheer competence relative to people. And I guess you could do that, for example, within Starfield in a similar way, and you could also do it with AI. And so I'm interested to see, are they going to approach those kind of stuff? And similarly with the bad faction, are we really going to have to just see a bad faction that has no depth to it? Or is it going to be something where they're justified in their minds? Is it going to be something where they're working to a bigger cause? Or they have some reasoning behind it other than we're bad? And that's kind of something that we generally see in a more cynical kind of mindset with Cyberpunk. You know, it was like the corporate people are bad, they're selfish, and there's no depth to them, there's no justification for it. And then, you know, the downtrodden people are good, and they're always the good people. Now, I will say with Todd Howard so far, if you have a look at, I think, the synthetic faction within the Fallout universe, it did have some of those questions being asked, and it was a bit more nuanced. And you could kind of justify the behaviour of, say, the Railroad, or any of the factions really, and see where they're coming from. And I think that degree of kind of like understanding different people's perspectives, I think is fun, and then seeing those factions interact, I think is great, and I'm happy to see that that seems to be the road that Starfield seems to be going down, and simply instead of exploring it in like a post-apocalyptic scenario, instead now it's going to be in a space scenario. Super look forward to seeing it, and I look forward to seeing where they go with it. Everything in this game is going to be new in terms of lore, because none of it's pre-established, so there's so many different ways that they could go. I look forward to seeing where they go. So until next time, have a great day. If you're not already, I would really appreciate you subscribing, because it helps the channel a bunch, and I'm not going to be releasing daily videos anymore. I think I'm going to do one every 3 or 4 days, and it's going to be a bit more information packed, and I'm going to kind of approach this more from a long-term perspective, because I think daily videos bump me out a little bit, so we're going to kind of do it like this and see how it goes. Again, subscribe if you're not already, do definitely subscribe. The videos are going to be high quality. Look forward to speaking to you next time. Have a great day. GG, I'm out.